Hello and welcome back to Deep Sleep Creep's YouTube channel. Today we're going to be listening to 3 true horror stories. So get comfortable, relax, and let's go deep. This story happened about a couple years ago, but it still creeps me out to this day. That being said, it's a little long of a story, so get comfortable. I'm an adult male with a tall build, weighing about 250 pounds, and I live with my dog, Oscar. My neighborhood is considered one of the nicer ones in my city, but it isn't without its share of crime incidents. Despite it being a nice area, for some reason, people are comfortable leaving their cars unlocked. Most of the crimes, you guessed it, tend to be car break-ins, where people are looking for easy grabs left in plain sight. And in the worst cases, the rare robbery of college students not from the area, or people walking around who are otherwise not paying attention to their surroundings. Growing up, I lived in much rougher parts of the city, so being alert and observant of my surroundings has always been second nature to me, especially at night. So much so that when my dog and I go for his nightly walks, he knows that it's all about the business of doing his business, and doing it quickly with no dilly-dallying. On this particular night, I was running late with a work project that had to get completed on time, and our walk was delayed about an hour past our regular time to 9 p.m. I absolutely hate going out too late. Already feeling anxious about missing our regular time, something told me to make sure I carry my Glock this time. So, after I got my dog in his harness and out the door, we started on our usual walk up the street, moving at a brisk pace. At this hour, the street is completely empty of pedestrians or car traffic, just eerily quiet. We get about halfway up the street before he starts sniffing around for a good area. That's when I spot a red pickup truck flying down the street well over the speed limit. The truck eventually comes to a screeching halt in the middle of the street, about 30 feet ahead of us. As soon as he hit his brakes, I quickly walked us a little further up, as to put a row of the sporadically spaced parked cars on the street in between us, and continue walking while maintaining eyes on the truck. As we walk by, the door opens and a guy gets out and is bent over coughing profusely, like a lot, and hacking up spit and whatnot in the middle of the street while holding onto the inside of his truck door with tinted windows. My dog and I both keep eyes on the guy as we're walking past, about 25 feet away from him. Now, some of you may wonder why I didn't immediately aid to his rescue, and that's because something didn't feel right about the situation. Even my dog was on high alert, which confirmed to me that there is definitely something not right about this situation. He then looks up at me while still keeping one arm inside the car door and says, "Hey, can you come here for a second?" Without breaking stride, I say, "Yeah, probably not going to do that," while rotating my body and walking backward as we pass him so as to not turn my back on him. While still backing away on our path, I ask him what's wrong. He then says, "I'm not feeling well, can you please just come over here?" While still backing away, I tell him no plainly, and that he can pull into any of the parking spaces on his side of the street and rest there until he feels better, or that I can call him an ambulance if he's really that bad off. Upon hearing this, his face contorted and went into a snarl. He was also suddenly no longer having coughing fits or under any sort of visible physical distress. Clearly pissed that I wouldn't cooperate, he then slightly closes the door a little so that it's still ajar, but his arm that was behind it is concealed behind his back now, and he started towards us saying, "Please come here, sir. I told you that I'm not feeling well." At this point, my dog started a low growl. He was also suspicious of the man and would not take his eyes off of him. My dog is a German Shepherd, I should have mentioned earlier, so his instincts are usually to protect me. I then clip my dog's leash to my belt and get parallel against the side of a large SUV parked on my side of the street, leaving about 20 feet between us. I also move my hand behind my back to the waistband and tell him that's close enough from behind the vehicle. He then stares at me, and I can literally see him working the math in his head on the chances of me bluffing, and he turns around and goes back to the truck, but doesn't leave. He reaches inside with the concealed hand and holds for about 10 seconds before he looks back at me over his shoulder and stares for 10 more seconds, only to see that I'm staring at him also. haven't left my position next to the buffer vehicle, nor turned my back to him. He says something to someone else in the passenger seat who is obscured by the tint, and then very quickly hops in, slams the door, and speeds back off up the street and into the night. I breathe a sigh of relief, and I can tell my dog is no longer on defense mode, and too calms down. He looks up at me and smiles, signaling me to know it's safe to continue walking. I kept my eyes around my surroundings as we walked back to our house. I've not seen the red truck again that night, and thankfully haven't afterwards. If anyone knows what that was about, please let me know. Was I being too paranoid, or do you think it was also too suspicious? This happened about 3 years ago, but I still think about it from time to time and it still creeps me out. I, at the time, was a 20-year-old male and had just moved into a new apartment on the first floor of the building. It was late one night and my roommate was out when somebody knocked on my door. This was not uncommon as we were in college, and my roommate had friends that would come by to hang out at all hours of the day. I just figured it was one of his friends, so I get up and check the peephole. Staring right back at me through the peephole is an eyeball pressed against it. Again, this is also something that one of our friends might do just to be funny. I chuckled and opened the door, and to my horror was shocked to see a guy in his mid-20s that I didn't recognize. I felt sick to my stomach seeing him there and froze to my core, unsure of what to do. He was strange to say the least. He was very hyper and immediately launched into a door-to-door salesman type pitch. I can't remember exactly what he was even selling, but it was something about the local university which I also attended at the time. The whole time he was talking, he kept looking past me into the apartment. He was fidgeting and even standing on his tiptoes to see inside. Still, I just thought the guy was weird and nervous and might not have been all there. I politely declined to buy anything from him, but he wouldn't take no for an answer. I finally had to be pretty stern in telling him that I wasn't interested. He finally accepted defeat, and as I was closing the door, he put his hand out and stopped the door from closing. Before I can be like, "What the F, dude?" he smiles at me and says, "I like Mario Kart on the Nintendo 64 too." Now me and my roommate have been staying up late into the night playing Mario Kart 64 in my bedroom for the past several days before that. But there was nothing that he could see from the apartment entrance that had anything to do with Mario Kart. I was taken aback and trying to add things up in my head and confusingly asked, "How do you know I play Mario Kart?" He then got super nervous and said, Oh, I just thought that anyone with a couch like that would be into Mario Kart on the Nintendo 64 because, you know, it's like a retro game and that's a retro couch. What the hell kind of explanation is that? As I was pondering what to say next and still confused, he then goes, "Okay, bye," and literally scurried away. I shut the door and locked it. I start trying to put the pieces together on how he could have known that, because obviously it wasn't because of my grandma's old couch. Remember, it's a first-floor apartment that backs up to the woods. My roommate got home shortly after that and I immediately told him about the encounter. He was freaked out too, and so we started investigating. At first it seemed as if there was no way to even see inside my bedroom. My blinds were always down. We went outside and tested it out and found that the only way to see inside would have been if you had your face right up against the window. And even then you kind of had to crouch and close one eye just to get a glimpse of the inside. A couple more creepy details. My window was over a balcony, and the Nintendo 64 console itself was stored inside of the TV stand and was not visible. You'd only be able to see it while we were actively playing, which we never did until we were a little stoned and it was like 2 a.m. So basically this creep had been jumping the railing to our balcony, pressing his face against my window, and watching us play Mario Kart in the middle of the night. Unfortunately, that's the only logical explanation we can come up with. Another guess is he's a sorcerer or a wizard, which for obvious reasons we didn't go with. Thankfully we never saw the guy again, but needless to say I was pretty paranoid for a while after that. I constantly checked my windows and woke up in the middle of night paranoid that he was standing just a couple feet away, watching me sleep. Just a very unsettling encounter. I'm glad that nothing more ever came of it, and that I never saw him again. but I have always wondered what his motives were. This is a real story of my experience with something unknown that left me shaking for days. I'll try to make it short, but also not leaving out any details. My name is Barry. I'm 20, and I'm from a small village in the north of Iran, up in a mountain area surrounded by a large forest. The story is that 2 years ago, when I was 18, it was partly a cloudy day, and I was going to go for a walk in the forest like I did every day, where the main path of the forest crosses from behind our house. So it wasn't like a long walk, but it was still deep in the forest. It's a dirt road with trees around you as far as the eye can see. On this particular night, it was kinda late compared to the time I usually walk, which was around 5:30, maybe 6 o'clock. It was getting dark, but because I was familiar with the path, I wasn't too worried about getting lost, and thinking I will be back soon made me just go for it. I was about 20 minutes into the walk, and it kept getting darker every minute. I get to a part of the path with a straight road, like 1,000 feet or so, and you can somewhat see the end of it. And as I was walking on that road, I see a dark figure at the end of the road. It just looked like a black thing standing in the middle of the road, and was like a dusk kind of time, so I wasn't sure what I'm looking at, especially in that distance. My first thought was probably a cow. It's a village, so a lot of people have farms around here, and sometimes they let their cows out into the woods for days, but usually in a large group. But I then thought, why is this one alone? And most importantly, why it's not moving? Believe it or not, I don't know why, but I didn't stop. Maybe it was the curiosity, or that I just didn't want to be a coward if it's a prank or some guy from the village. I don't really know what I was thinking in that moment. I just remembered staring at the thing without a blink as I was walking towards it. The thing that creeped me out the most was why the hell this thing doesn't move an inch. I was just getting more and more scared as I was getting closer to it. I started to see a shape. It was a tall figure, long and skinny legs. At one point I think I saw a third leg or maybe a stick in his hands. I don't know exactly. It was so blurry. I kept walking and still not knowing what I'm looking at. My heart skipped a beat as I stopped, maybe 60 feet from the figure, to just stare at it and trying to see what it would do. But it did nothing. It just kept standing still without a single move or sound. I didn't have the courage to say anything. I remember just thinking, F it, and turned around and walked away. As I was walking back, I constantly looked back behind my shoulder, paranoid of seeing that thing move, but every time I looked back it was just standing there as I was getting further away and finally out of sight. It was almost completely dark at this point. After a few turns I was able to calm down a little bit. I slowly stopped worrying and kept walking at a normal pace and tried to not think about what just happened. I pulled out my phone to call a friend to just talk with them until I got home to lessen my nerves a little bit. More so to distract myself from what I just saw. And just before I got home I had a feeling that I should look back one more time. Against my better judgment, I looked back for the last time, which to this day wish I never did, and saw something that traumatized me for life and still makes me shake from fear to this day. I saw the same blurry black figure, standing still, in the middle of the road, looking at me at about 50 feet. I didn't stand there to see if it moved or not this time. Instead, I ran for my life. I ran feeling like if I stopped, I would die. I didn't look behind my back once. I just ran home, and when I got home, I opened and slammed the door shut and locked it fast. My hands and feet were shaking, which was something that I never experienced, and I hope I never do again. My family was worried too, after I told them what just happened. They were more so worried about me and not the figure, as they told me I was hallucinating and not to worry too much. But I could tell from their eyes that they were shocked and scared as I was. I never experienced such a thing again and never mentioned it to anyone until today. But this experience will forever be in my mind and haunt me forever.